and we hope you're doing well in these extraordinary times. Welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena, where we discuss the challenges, the opportunities in the world of fintech today. And today, we're getting political. With me today, I have two guests. First of all, the man who sold WorldPlate for RBS for far too little, the godfather of fintech, Nick Ogden. Hi, Nick.
Hi there, how are you?
Good, thank you. And secondly, the head of corporate affairs for none other than the wonderful Starling Bank, Alex Frean. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Hannah. Hi, Nick.
So this week on the Virtual Arena, we're very lucky because both of our guests have been in the news, but not just for their fintech. They've been getting political, sticking up for Britain's businesses and even lobbying government. So Nick, over to you. Can you tell us more about what's been going on? Can we start celebrating yet?
I don't think so, unfortunately. It would be great to, but I think the reality is that we all know that we're in somewhat of a crisis at the moment. And what started off as a medical crisis is rapidly becoming a very, very serious economic crisis. I think that the reason why I got involved in this is that I founded a number of successful businesses and have been at the early stage entrepreneur position many times. Going to a bank, getting overdrafts, all of that stuff. So got the t-shirt, know how hard it is to set a business up. And when I sort of saw what was happening in relation to the UK's response to the coronavirus, in relation to trying to mitigate the economic tsunami, which everybody could see that was coming, it wasn't making the news headlines because of course the dreadful toll that we have, the human toll that we're still facing from coronavirus was the most important story. But underneath that, the economic tsunami was building rapidly. And it was quite clear that around the world, different countries were dealing with that issue in different ways and more quickly. And the UK, for whatever reason, was going slowly, much, much too slowly. And part of the problem, I think, was if you just go and compare the effectiveness of the programs in Switzerland and France and Spain, is we were not geared up at all to distribute and to effectively deliver the massive amount of money that the government very, very bravely and sensibly allocated to try to mitigate the economic issue that we're facing. We were just not geared up for that distribution. And what's happened, it's not a fault. This isn't a conversation about a blame. This is a conversation about what's really happened. And what's happened is that we have not leveraged the distribution channels that existed in the UK, which had been created largely as a result of this current government's work to create a competitive marketplace, which is why, Clearbank, the bank I founded, Starling, which is the bank that Anne founded, actually exist in the UK today, and many other fintechs. And what's happened is all of the great work that's been done by the fintechs to widen the distribution, because that was the whole competition challenge, allow people to have choice to the financial service providers and services that they wanted. That's been lost in the rush, albeit slow rush, to try and deliver a solution to the marketplace. And numbers speak for themselves. In the first week in Switzerland, 120,000 businesses got 200 billion Swiss francs. It's huge, the distribution capability that they had to get the money out. In France, it's a very, very similar story. What we've done here is we've relied, or for whatever reason, we've relied initially on the incumbent banks. And again, I'm not knocking the incumbent banks. They must have found out about what was expected of them and been horrified. And I think the trick that's been missed, and sadly now, if you listen to certainly the reports that were coming out from the Bank of England yesterday, and if you read paragraph 23 of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting notes from the Bank of England on Wednesday, you will see that there's a general realization that we have a big issue. The distribution of the loans that we needed to get the economy is running behind the curve. And whilst now it's speeding up, which is great, that is a great point. We've had a gap of probably 3 weeks when businesses could have got themselves sorted out, could have responded to what's going on, structured their businesses, planned for the future, planned to emerge from this economic disaster. And that still has yet to happen. So that's why I've been getting quite vocal about my concerns for UK SMEs.
It's very sobering words. Alex, I know over in Starling Bank you've also been working very hard, trying lots of different approaches. What's your experience been? What's your news?
Well, I wouldn't repeat what Nick said. I think he has summed up the situation very well. And I think what it has shown us in the fintech sector is that we need to do more to explain the benefits of financial technology to government, because I don't think they really got it. What to me is quite ironic is that companies like the one like Clearbank, like Starling, Monzo, other successful fintechs have been held up as this shiny success story in the UK by ministers when it suits them. But I don't think that got very deep under their skin, and I don't think certainly at the right levels in Downing Street, while there might be people in the Treasury who understand what we're doing, although I'm not entirely sure about that, I do think that it has shown how big the task is for us to really explain what our capabilities are. It's not just saying, oh, here's a success story. So we need to get that message a lot deeper. And I think credit to the government that they tried to act quickly. But once it became clear that for example, the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme was not going to work, there appeared to be a reluctance to do anything about it, and it all became very, very political, and it was supremely unhelpful for the government to start bank bashing very early on, which is what they did. And
how do you mean bank bashing?
Well, the banks were pretty much threatened that if they didn't get their act together, they could have faced the consequences. We bailed you out during the financial crisis. Now it's payback time, and that doesn't apply to the fintech sector, because we exist precisely because of all the wrongs of the financial crisis. But even saying that to the big banks was not helpful when you're trying to get money out the door quickly. And I think that was a big misstep. And I think also as the government managed people's expectations very badly. This is not for me to have a bash at the government. It's hard doing what they're trying to do. And I wouldn't like to be in their shoes. But, you know, when the C-bills loans were first announced, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, said, any good company will have easy access to this money. And that just wasn't true. So people just thought that money would be handed out very, very quickly in a way that the new bounce back loan scheme is intended to do. And so there's a lot of frustration and a lot of pushback, and the government decided it was going to blame the banks for that.
I think one of the other things as well is that the Treasury didn't realise that this distribution mechanism, we're all running business continuity plans. Every bank in the country, with the agreement of their regulators, was running a programme which was effectively closing down their offices, moving people back home, following all the interruptions, advice that was being given by the government. And having to restructure your business, you know, doing that in a BCP, and, you know, Alex and I, we've all done it in the tests and it all works fine. We all have a laugh and go and have a beer afterwards. Having to do that in real life for a protracted length of time is something that no bank in this country, or probably around the world, has ever experienced before. And then on top of that, to laden a limited number of banks up with a massive amount of work, which they had never planned to, was bringing, you know, two massive tasks together, which were just going to collide.
So why do you think fintechs have been left out of this conversation? Why don't you think they were brought in sooner?
I don't know. I know that Stephen Jones at UK Finance, Charlotte Croswell at Finance UK, they have all been arguing the corner. And I think that, you know, through the work that everybody in the industry, I think this is, you know, it's been a collective effort from everybody in the industry trying to shout to the politicians, say, hey, we're here to help. You know, we have 167 alternative lenders set up. Why did we do that? We did that because those businesses have the ability and the experience to lend money to small to medium-sized businesses. The Bank of England, in a report in March of this year, recognised the transition that had taken place in the UK lending market to these 167 lenders. Right? They're not lending at the moment because their liquidity has dried up because of the state of the marketplace. They could have been enabled to support the overall effort of UK PLC in trying to get money into businesses that were likely to survive. And for whatever reason, all right, that whole distribution route, the use of fintechs, the use of the challenger banks. I mean, Starling is doing some stuff I know already on the CBILS and I think on bounce back loans, but it's not enough. And I think the reality, we've got another week to run of this. By the end of next week, the reality of all of this is start to come home. Due Dil have already started to put together a program to try and work out what the failure rate of businesses has been since the start of this medical outburst with coronavirus. And I think those figures are going to start to really be shocking, especially when you set aside of that, you've got 6 million people furloughed, all right, and unemployment rates projected to go through the roof. The disaster that we're going to have to work our way through, and it is going to have to be worked through, is going to be quite significant. And it's easier to keep a business going, all right, and trade it through and resolve how the money is going to be paid back than to do a startup. Startups take time.
And I think if I may just add, I'd just like to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, Hannah, and that is that I think it shows the scale of the task that the fintech industry faces. We have to step up. We obviously had not done a good enough job of explaining our capabilities to the Treasury, to Downing Street, to all of those decision makers and their advisors. And we weren't to know this was just around the corner, but I think it shows that we really have to up our game now in explaining the benefits of what we do, because we clearly had not got that message through well enough.
Do you think it's the role of fintechs to present their capabilities to government, or do you think government should be meeting more in the middle and reaching out?
Well, the fact is of course we have to, because the government didn't reach out, or they didn't reach out sufficiently. So that sort of answers your question. It didn't happen. And so we need to do more. I think, of course, they've got to meet us halfway, but sometimes you have to persuade people it's worth their while to meet you halfway. And, we haven't had the same might that the big banks have had, and the same existential importance to the system that the big banks have had. But now, hopefully, they will see that.
I think, Hannah, the worst thing that has happened in all of this, from my point of view, was the BBC News report on Monday, where the BBC was effectively saying to small business owners, if you don't bank with the big banks, use the current account switching scheme to move back to them, away from the challenger banks, which this government had been instrumental in forming. I took that and have taken that to the Competition and Markets Authority. I've mentioned that on a number of occasions, that if this was a normal life, if we weren't going through the medical crisis, you'd have the CMA and the Payment Service Regulator going absolutely nuts about the behaviour that is being put on to the UK marketplace. And again, this isn't intentional, but it's very important that somebody understands very soon that not only they can end up with damaging the economic heartland or centre of the UK, but the prized fintech community, because it is prized, because on every government mission they wave the flag about it, is equally being damaged and destroyed by the lack of inclusion in these support programs.
What do you hope will happen as a result of that? Do you hope that they will be retracted, or that more fintechs will be onboarded?
I hate to say this, but I think we're running late now. And I think that yes, things could change. Yes, next week we could, the government could embrace different fintechs. And I'm not trying to argue a case for any particular fintech. I'm trying to argue a case for the marketplace to support the government. So yes, a lot of things could be reversed quite quickly next week. That's 4 weeks after the identical work was carried out by our continental partners in Europe. And so we've got that 4-week gap. And just by turning a tap on and saying, look, you can now apply for a loan, that doesn't fix the issues. And I think that if we are going to take advantage of the fintech capability in the UK, that's got to happen like really quickly, the early part of next week. Because if it drifts on, it will have no use.
Hannah, if I could just butt in there, if I may, I think Starling's in a different position to a lot of the other fintechs, because we're a fully licensed bank. So we we have liquidity. We have lots of liquidity, so we have money to lend. We've just been working as hard as we can to get the money out the door, and we'll be we've launched C-bills loans. We'll be launching bounce back loans Monday today, and so I think that our frustration is perhaps not as great as we've seen with the fintechs that are not deposit-taking institutions.
Do you think fintechs are getting frustrated? Do you think that they're now becoming more political because they have to?
It's definitely to pick up on that point. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Alex. Starling is a full-blown bank, as is Clearbank. We don't do lending. Our business model is different. But I think the issue is that the many of the fintechs, certainly the fintechs in the lending arena, relied upon a wholesale market to raise funds that they could lend onto. The rates in the wholesale market have gone north to around 10%. And so they end up in a situation where even if they could raise money to lend on, those rates would be perceived as being usury by the government. And so the approach we were trying to take was to get access to some of the £330 billion that Rishi Sunak had applied for the initial part of trying to resolve this issue, and to channel that money back into the alternative lending markets as a substitution for liquidity that wasn't available to them. And I think that could go via Clearbank, go via Starling, go through any of the banks. It's not a specific route to channel that's the issue. It's the fact that money isn't being channeled through to the alternative lending market, and the alternative lending market in the main isn't able to help us on this crisis.
Alex?
Well, I think just to go back to your question, you said, do you think fintech is sort of becoming very political? I think fintech is intrinsically political, and it always has been. It is full of people intent on disrupting the old order. That's what fintech is. And the only difference now is that we're facing a crisis, and our capabilities and the need for what the sector has built has become ever more apparent. So I think it is an inherently political sector, and I think it's full of idealists who want to, make the financial sector better. And one day, fintech will be the establishment, and then we will be disrupted by something that hasn't yet been invented. And I look forward to that day, because we will need disrupting when that happens. But I think the good thing about fintech is that it is full of people, like Nick, like Anne at Starling, who are willing to speak out, and who understand the old world and the new world, and how the new world can help out the old world. And I think that is a positive thing in what is rather a depressing conversation we're having here, is that I think that, let's not underestimate the determination and the courage and the innovative qualities of the fintech sector.
I think you're absolutely right, and to sort of lift the depression lid just a little bit to cheer us up towards the end of this. The reality is that coming out of this, all of the fintech challenges, be they challenger banks or be they challenger fintechs at different levels, have been able to respond to this crisis from a technical perspective in a far more agile way than the incumbents. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in a year's time, whether regulators have started to embrace a different working model for regulated businesses. Because if they do, that's going to have a significant benefit in relation to cost, profitability and service, I think, that the agile fintechs can deliver into the UK marketplace.
So a little bit of optimism there, which is quite admirable at the moment. So thank you.
Yeah, and Hannah, if I can just say, I don't think there should be fintechs against the big banks either. I think it's really important that the whole industry pulls together, and I think we've really felt that. Anne Bowden was at the Treasury Select Committee on Monday last week, and with some of the big banks. And what struck me about that whole session was the sort of feeling that everyone is pulling together. We face different problems to the big banks, but there wasn't a sort of us and them mentality, and there isn't time for that right now. And we need to make this sort of, of course it's political with a small p, but there's a job to do, and everybody has to focus on that. And that is, I would hate to think of people will go away from this and think, oh, well, there's two factions. Right now, we should all be pulling in the same direction. If only the fintechs would be allowed to.
Exactly right.
So we all need to pull together to get the job done and worry about the politics afterwards.
Absolutely.
Cool. So speaking of other fintechs, it's now to end the show, we like to finish with our top 5 something of the week. And this week I'd like to suggest our top 5 business defenders or even government lobbyists. So I'll go to that saying that you are both included, but who else would you put in that top 5 list this week?
I've thrown in Hugh Van Stennis, who used to be Mark Carney's advisor at the Bank of England.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a bit contrary, and I'm going to throw in Bo at RBS to show that you can't just do fintech out of a box from the big corporate budget. I think there's a wonderful lesson for the whole sector there.
Mm-hmm. And well, I'd like to throw one in. I'd like to throw in Counting Up, because they have just issued a while ago actually, their open letter to the government, trying to really push them to see what they're doing to self-employed people and small businesses. And it's really taken one step beyond fintech and really moved into the world of politics. Any more?
I'd like to add one as well, and this will be a strange one for you, but I think it's true and accurate, and that's Andrew Bailey at the Bank of England, who's been saying it as it is for the past few weeks, and trying to support the market, and that's supporting fintechs, leading potentially the fintech challenge. But he has been very, very, very firm in his views, and he should be applauded for that.
Shout out to him. Is that everyone for our top 5? Well, top 7?
I think we should have a shout out for the fintech media, for organisations such as yourself, for people like 11FS. You know, I've been a journalist all my career until I joined Starling, and I think there is some great coverage going on. It's really important right now. Sometimes I don't like the coverage, but that's how it should be. It's not there to make us feel comfortable.
Well, thank you very much. That's very lovely, and thank you for everyone at Fintech Finance. So that ends another session of the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. Thank you so much to my guests, Alex and Nick, and we hope that you are all staying safe at home. See you next time.